Tina, fun. What's up, man? One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing, testing. Is this thing on? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? No worries. 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello. I'm getting a indicator that my microphone's working. The little audio green lights are bobbing on and off as I talk. So it's good. Okay, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna mute my speaker right now, my microphone right now, and kill the camera. Well, actually, I'll leave the camera on, but I'm going to kill the audio, and then I got to go run in and do a couple things. But I'll be like 5 minutes ahead of time. I'll be ready to go. Okay. All right. Good job, Connor. Thank you. And say okay. Say thanks to Justin too. Hey, did you see my text messages scroll by? Okay. I was just okay. I was just wondering if if you spot any questions, if you will put them in chat so I can see them. How do you have the Hangout open? Is it in a full window or is it just in a tab on your browser? It's in a tab on the browser. Okay. So what I would do is most of our engagement is going to be on Facebook. So I would actually stop the stream and just mute it on Facebook and you'll be able to see the Facebook comments. Okay. You won't have to look at anything else. Okay. All right on. Thanks, dude. No problem. All right. Bye. Okay. It appears to be working. Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Mike Broihier here at the Chicken Bristle Farm. Welcome to Chicken Bristle Live. Uh, we'll be here every night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Chance for us to all talk, check in, see how everyone's doing out there during the time of pandemic. And listen, we're going to be talking about some updates a little bit on the COVID virus. We're going to tell some stories from the campaign trail, and I'll be taking questions on anything that you care to talk about. It can be about politics. It can be about farming. It can be about, well, whatever you're interested in. Hey, before we get started for the night, I would like to remind everybody that is interested in volunteering or working for the campaign to go to mikeforky.com/sign up, and that'll just take you to a form, and they'll give you an opportunity to put in your information, say what you're interested in doing, and it'll be a big help to the campaign. Of course, nowadays it's campaign is a little bit different. I don't know when we're going to have people out knocking on doors, or we'll be going back to meet and greets and town halls and forums and things like that. But we're going to do our best to do it digitally. So programming note here from Chicken Bristle Live, starting Thursday, I guess, we're going to start having guests, and we're going to try to bring in somebody different every night to talk about COVID-19, talk about what's happening in our communities, talk about what's happening in politics. And so we hope to get some interesting guests and get a couple other faces on the screen, and hopefully you'll find that interesting and enjoying. I'll try to get some. We'll have the schedule nailed down a little bit tomorrow, and I'll try to get the schedule out on social media, Twitter, Facebook, etc., so you know who's coming up and when to tune in. All right. So tonight, last night was a little bit of a downer. The news is a little bit of a downer, so we're going to try to keep it. We're going to try to keep things light, and um, I'm going to start with a great quote. We'll call it the quote of the day. That's coming from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And this is some sound advice. She says, "Don't take medical advice from a man who looked directly at a solar eclipse." So that was, I never found Hillary to be particularly hilarious, but I thought that was very, very funny, and also sound advice. The President of the United States was the one who looked directly into the solar eclipse. So let's not take medical advice from that guy. All right. So today, I read a great story about people doing acts of kindness and selflessness during the pandemic, and it was really kind of inspiring. There's a lot of people, normal folks that maybe on a day-to-day basis we wouldn't even notice as we went about our daily lives. And so I'd ask you if you'd like to post some comments if you know of somebody or have seen someone just doing some random act of kindness that really kind of improved your day. Go ahead and post it in the comments. Also, I've seen a couple other threads about the work that restaurants are doing to keep the restaurants open. And if you've got a restaurant in your area that's doing yeoman's work and keeping people working in their kitchens and putting some delivery folks to work, post that too, and we'll post them along. I'll be interested to see if you're bored of your own cooking yet. We're not here. We love our own cooking here in the Chicken Bristle Farm, but I'd like to see if you're getting some good takeout wherever you are. No one delivers out here into Chicken Bristle, but that would be a great day. All right. So restaurants, random acts of selflessness, go ahead and post them in the comment section, and we'll make sure people get the recognition that they need. Hope everyone's doing okay. And I hope that, you find a little bit of comfort in tuning in on evenings like this when there's not too much going on. And great chance for you to share what's on your mind, reach out to people. But we were going to do something a little bit different tonight. Like I said, we're going to try to keep it a little bit lighter. So now every night we're going to do a trivia contest of one kind or another. And the prize will be the much sought after campaign t-shirt in the size of your choice, mailed to your house. And so tonight we're going to do music trivia. And this might be a hard one. Now, here's the deal. No Googling, no looking things up on the internet and trying to figure out who this is. So what I'm looking for is the name of the song and the name of the artist. And the first person to get the answer correct and get it up in the comment section will win a T-shirt of their choice. So here's the clue. It's real simple. It's only 2 words. Gangster, white walls. That's it. No Googling. And so let's see who gets this. This is probably a age-appropriate music trivia quiz for those of you of a certain age. So you might want to jump on this one and send it in. Also, I'll tell you this: the artist is not who you think it is. Okay. We're going with the notes tonight because a lot of things we want to talk about. So you know what? I don't like talking about Mitch McConnell all day, but we are going to talk about him a little bit. So I watched a little bit of C-SPAN tonight, and before I came on, and speech that the Senate Majority Leader gave earlier today. I got to tell you, the guy is freaking shameless. He really is. When I hear, so he said that now is not the time for finger pointing, and he said that people who are trying to push different agendas as they work towards getting some kind of pandemic relief bill, he said they're engaged in culture wars. Now, of course, culture wars, that's a dog whistle. It's a dog whistle to those in the right. You know, it's like using the term social justice warrior. It's red meat to his crowd. And I'll tell you what, it is kind of a culture war. You know, maybe he's right. There's a culture of people who think that that the stock market is the most important thing. It's the best indicator of the economic health of our country. And then there are those of us who think that people having access to good paying job, fair job, fair wages, healthcare, food, being able to make their mortgage or rent payment or their car payment. There are some of us on the other side of the divide who thinks that that's important. Now, when Mitch McConnell calls for unity and says this is the time for us to work together, this is coming from a guy who said that his job as Senate Majority Leader was to make President Obama a one-term president, and that he was going to try to block anything that President Obama tried to do and make him a failed president. And he was fairly successful at that. Luckily, at least for the first 2 years of President Obama's first administration, the 2009, 2011, we had majority in the House and the Senate. But thereafter, we had Mitch McConnell. And despite a lot of people's hard work, he just worked every single day to block any kind of progressive advancements that the president wanted to make for this nation. Also, the guy calling for unity is the same guy who kept a Supreme Court seat open for 293 days so that he could deny President Obama's elevation of Merrick Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court, and delivered that first seat to Donald Trump. 293 days. And here's the crazy thing. He said that it's not right for a president to nominate a Supreme Court justice in his final year. And then when asked last year by a reporter if a seat came open on the Supreme Court in President Trump's last year, if he'd fill it, and he kind of laughed with that stupid smirky laugh of his and said, "Oh yeah, I'd fill that." And so this is the guy who's calling for unity right now. And I got a call, and the call is that it's time for us to vote him and his toxic kind of leadership right out of Washington, D.C. All right. So, all right. Now, one of the last thing I want to talk about is about this relief package that's going through. It seems like it's pretty close. One of the key issues is that the Democrats want is increasing SNAP benefits. This used to be known as food stamps. This is food. This isn't cash. This isn't healthcare. This is food to the poorest people in the country. And right now, during a time of food insecurity, this is something they want to fight about, and this is something they say is a part of this culture war. This is something we're fighting for, and I think the Republicans are getting nervous about getting this bill passed, and I think we're going to see an increase in SNAP benefits, and it's not a lot. I think it's 15%, but it's very important, particularly for the poor and the working poor in this country, to during a time we've all seen of food insecurity. All right. So that being said, I did an interview this morning. I actually did a series of interviews today, 2 radio, 1 newspaper, and one of the radio interviews was odd. I should have known. The radio station plays 3 hours of Rush Limbaugh a day and a couple of hours of Sean Hannity and some other jokers, and you know, the host could not get through his head the fact that bailing out companies that had laid off their workers and weren't paying benefits to their workers borders on criminal. And we went around and around a couple times about it, and it was just, there was no communicating with this guy. And it's kind of one thing I've learned on the campaign trail is that there are a number of people, a certain percentage of people, that you will never ever be able to get through to. It's Fox News, it's Alex Jones, and it's the Thomas Massey's, for our Congressman Thomas Massey, people like that, who are just shameless about putting out flagrant lies to the American public. And it's been going on for decades, but now we are in a national crisis, and they just will not let up. And we've talked about this before, but it is going to cost people their lives. So, like I said, this guy's ignorance and willful wrong advice and information to people bordered on criminal. And that being said, let's switch topics a little bit here. And something I want to talk about for a little while is criminal justice reform. And it's at the root of my campaign is economic and social justice. And if you've heard me speak in public before, you've heard me say this, that when I started my campaign, I looked at social and economic justice as 2 completely separate things. And one of the great things about running a campaign, is really forces you to think very, very hard about some of the things that you feel intuitively. And as I worked my way through social justice and economic justice, I found out that they are just so inextricably linked to almost be the same thing. And so one of the topics that I have on my website, mikeforky.com, is if you look under the issues section, there is a whole section on criminal justice reform. And I think probably if you're listening, you know and understand that our criminal justice system has caused racial disparities and has affected generations of communities and families. The way the laws are written, from the way the laws are written to how they're enforced, to who's found guilty in our criminal justice system, to who gets a long prison sentence and who has a shot of parole, all have led to more people of color, particularly Black men and women, to spend time in prison at much, much higher rates. There was a interesting survey done. I think it was done by the Courier Journal. I'm not sure. And it was a real hard boil down on who gets convicted of crimes, who gets sentenced to jail, and how long they go to jail for. And what they found is that if you were a African American male and you committed the identical crime that a white male committed, the exact same crime, controlling for every other variable, controlling for prior convictions, prior contact with law enforcement, you were like twice as likely to be arrested, 3 times as likely to go to trial, and 3 times as likely to go to jail. 3 times more likely to go to jail, based only on the color of your skin. And that is wrong. And I mean, when you can, there are some people who are never going to believe those numbers, but they're out there. and you can see it, and they'll want to argue a million different ways about why one person rather than another goes to jail. But what it comes down to is that it depends on the color of your skin. And the other factor about criminal justice, at least in Kentucky, is that um, we put way more women in jail in Kentucky than almost every other state in the nation. We're number two. In the last 7 years, there's been a 300% increase in the number of women in prison. And again, and we're not talking about jail, we're talking about prison. And there's a much higher likelihood that it's a woman of color who's going to jail. And we need to acknowledge that our criminal justice system is based in systemic racism that goes back to Jim Crow, and we need to take steps to dismantle that, the racial outcomes in our criminal justice system. And I think honestly, the first thing to do is to not jail people for nonviolent crimes. It's just we put way too many people in jail, and part of it is because we've turned prison into an industry. It's a for-profit industry. There are large corporations in this country that run prisons as a business. They donate money to politicians, and politicians are going to keep these laws in place and these systems in place as long as their bread is being buttered. So I think the very, very first thing we need to do at the state and federal level is to grossly reduce the number of people um, that we put in jail, because justice outcomes in America are really driven by a defendant's income. You know, um, we have a cash bail system in the United States. Now I'm talking about jail instead of prison, but we have a cash bail in the United States that is biased against people with low or no income. Um, you get arrested for something. Say you do something. Say it's drunk driving, right? Um, if you cannot pay the cash to get out, you are going to sit in jail until in a county jail until you get a trial date, and that's where you're going to be. I think about that. It depends on what county you're in. Some counties are a little bit more cost effective if they have their own jail. For example, Lincoln County, where I live, we have a jail, but we contract out to several surrounding counties. They pay a higher rate that kind of offsets it for my county, and right there is a profit motive. And the federal government pays the most, the state pays the second most, and then adjoining counties pay the third most amount of money to our county to keep people in jail. So the number of people who are sitting in jail, the overcrowding in jails, and the amount of time people spend in jail has a very, very definite profit motive involved in it. And we need to remove that. And for those of you out there who are fiscal conservatives or claim to be fiscal conservatives, so we put somebody in jail for 10, 20, 30 days as they wait a trial date, right? Because they can't pay their bail. On the average in Kentucky, $124 a day, right? So let's do that. Let's do the math. What are we talking about? $3,600 to $700 to keep people in jail. That comes right out of our pockets. And the far side of that is this: that person probably has lost their job, and they have lost their job. They're not paying their taxes. They're not kicking into Social Security, and no one is there to take care of their family. And so, going back to my original point about the that economic and social justice being inextricably linked. This is just one of those rabbit holes that I went down as I was refining my campaign platform, and saw that it's very, very difficult to sort these out. So, one of the things that takes me to kind of a natural progression is that we put people in jail for nonviolent offenses, and we keep them in jail and then in prison for a long period of time. So we have over incarceration. It's a huge drain on our tax dollars. And now, one of the things that we put people in jail for, and it actually came up as Kentucky was considering allowing medicinal marijuana, is that we put people in jail for relatively minor drug crimes. and people go to prison for relatively small drug crimes. And listen, here's the thing. I know we got an opioid crisis. I know we got people dealing drugs and all the crimes that are associated with drug dealing. But I'd like to take marijuana completely out of the script. I want to write it completely out of the script. It needs to be descheduled at the federal level, which means that it is not on the schedule of drugs. Right now, it is on the same schedule as opioids. And so it needs to be federally descheduled and decriminalized. I think that we need to treat it basically the way we used to treat tobacco. Let people in Kentucky farm it on a share, with a share, just like we used to do with tobacco. That if you have a farm and a certain number of acres, you can grow weed. And here's the problem: is that whenever there's money involved, politicians' ears perk up and their nostrils start to flare, and they see a way to make money. So Ohio, 2 years ago, had a bill to decriminalize marijuana. They're going to have recreational and medicinal marijuana, and but and the governor was all for it. I think it was John Kasich was all for it, and the advocates of legalizing marijuana were all for it until the bill got written. And the way the bill got written was that only a handful of people would be allowed to grow, process, and sell marijuana. Okay, and that means that politicians would be once again beholden to corporations and businesses with money. So this is the way I look at it. Growing it should be done the way we used to grow tobacco. Based, if you've got a farm, you got a farm ID, an X number of acres, well, that's your share of marijuana you can grow. And also, the way I'd write the law is that the same person could not grow or process or sell marijuana. They had to be discrete people, and they sure as heck aren't going to be buddies of people in Washington, D.C. or in Frankfort, Kentucky, because this is a business that should be done for all Kentuckians if we're going to do it. Okay, so that's it for me on weed. I know that sometimes people are a little bit concerned, but here's the deal. We've talked about this before. People self-medicate. I would much rather see them self-medicating with something that grows here in the wild, and it grows in Kentucky. We all know that. Than with a really, really strong pharmaceutical drug that was obtained legally or legally. So that's it. That's me on weed. We'll probably have a chance to talk about this sometime soon. All right. So I'm going to give you some tales for the trail here. Something I like to talk about. I've told you last night that it was amount of times I've spent on the road. Lynn and I have spent talking to people. We've met some interesting people and gone some interesting places. And so I'd like to share them with you. Just as a quick reminder, if you're interested and you're interested in supporting the campaign, obviously love to have you donate. And you can do that at mikeforky.com. Just mash that donate button. And here's the deal. We're coming up on the end of our reporting period, is the end of March 31st. And I am not going to have nearly as much money as my next closest competitor, because she has bazillions of dollars. But here's what I'd like. I would like to have as many unique donors as possible. And I'd like to have as many small dollar donors as possible. So if you go to mikeforky.com, and you can, I know times are tough right now, even if it's $1 or $3, when those numbers come out, I would much rather have a lot of small dollar donors than a handful of big dollar donors who think I'm going to owe them something when I get to Washington. Also, if you're interested in volunteering to help the campaign, same website, mikeforky.com/sign up, and that'll be an opportunity for you to get in there and volunteer and do something to help the campaign out, get the word out. Okay. Well, so one of the first campaign stops I ever made was out to Cecilia, Kentucky, which is in Hardin County. Cool little, just a cool little town, Hardin County, and they've got a real great Democratic Party out there. And so they invited me to come to Cecilia Days, and it was hot. It was early August, and it was hot and dry, and but I met some really, really good people there that day, interesting people. And so the first person that I really got to spend time with was Judge Joanne Wheeler Bland, who many of you people in Kentucky know from her role in Kentucky politics. She was a lawyer in private practice. She was a judge. I believe she was on the Kentucky Supreme Court for quite a while, and just an amazing, strong woman with an incredible um, life story. And I never would have met her if I didn't run for office. I never would have found myself, I don't think, sitting in the shade of a tree in Cecilia, Kentucky, talking to Joanne Wheeler Bland. But she'd been involved in politics for an awful long time, and very involved in the Kentucky Democratic Women's Club, both locally in Hardin County and at the state level. And actually was very kind enough to arrange to have me speak at the annual convention in Louisville. And I have to also say that Stephanie Wolfenbarger, who was the president, also was kind enough to let me speak. And it was kind of fun because the way it was scheduled, all the other candidates came in on a Saturday, and just the way it worked out, I got to come in on Sunday. And at that point, the ladies at the convention were not bored of listening to candidates speak for hours on end. And so I walked in the door. I thought I was going to slip in the back and listen in, see what was going on. And I walked in the door, and President Wolfenbarger basically said, "Here's Mike," and handed me the microphone. So I got to talk. But the cool thing about that is I got to meet all of these wonderful ladies that participate in various county Democratic women's clubs, which are very, very strong, backbone of Democratic politics in Kentucky by my judgment. And so I just basically stood at the back of the room with my calendar out and just was putting in dates to go and talk to these groups, and they've been very kind and very supportive, and truly um, showed me where the power of particularly women in Kentucky stand in Democratic politics and state politics. So it was great to talk to Joanne Wheeler Bland, and she not only talked to me about nuts and bolts kind of politicking in Kentucky, but her wisdom on a life spent in law in Kentucky, politics, and talking about issues of gender equality really gave me a kind and thorough lesson in this, and couldn't have been a better day spent out there in Cecilia, Kentucky. Um, the couple other folks I met out there, I met a couple um, who ran a family logging business. And this is just as the president was really, really kicking off on China in our trade war with China and putting tariffs on Chinese goods, and Chinese responded. And one of the first things they put a tariff on was low grade timber. And when I talk about low grade timber, I'm just talking about general construction timber and interior furniture, interior furniture, lumber. So we're not talking about high quality hickory or mahogany or maple and stuff like that. We're talking about construction material. And this couple were on the ropes. They had no idea where they were going to sell their product, because all of the mills within the United States had plenty of construction low grade lumber, and they had plenty of supplies of high quality stuff for making furniture and things like that. And this couple that because it's a small business, and they were all working in the same area, and they knew 4 other businesses run by families that had already gone bankrupt because of these tariffs. They could not pay their payroll, they couldn't maintain their equipment because they had no one to sell their lumber to. And so in a small place in Cecilia, Hardin County, 5 businesses went out because of a senseless trade war with China, for which we got nothing. And truly, I don't know what the president gets out of it. I think some people think it's kind of macho and makes you look strong when you're going to take on the Chinese or something like that. But it hurts people. It hurts farmers, and it hurts the timber industry. And every one of those businesses that go out, there are other businesses that, excuse me. Okay, no COVID-19, folks. Trust me. Um, but there are secondary and tertiary businesses to support them, restaurants, you know, the business, the places they shop, the people who maintain their equipment, that do the welding on their heavy equipment, all those places take a hit, not just those lumber companies. So that was a really, really great talk. And so the husband, who is a lifelong Republican, said that they know exactly how they're going to vote. And I think I got their votes that day, talking to them about my plans for the future. All right, so second tale from the trail for tonight. There's a lady that I think you should know. She's from Louisville, and her name is Hannah Drake, and she's a poet and a public speaker, and just a incredibly strong and dynamic and intelligent woman. Um, and uh, but her business, I guess, is that she is a poet, and she's published and very, very well respected and awesome. And you know, I don't think she supports my campaign, but I support her, and I like her a lot. I like it when I see her, because she's smart and she's powerful and she's unapologetic, and she does not suffer fools. Um, so before I had a meeting with her, I'd of course, I wanted to know something about her before I went to see her. So I went on YouTube. I went to her website, and then bounced over to YouTube and watched her give spoken word performances of some of her poems. And I have to tell you, it was just a privilege watch them, and it taught me a lot about what that word privilege means. I think my favorite poem that she wrote was something called 10 and 2. And 10 and 2, of course, refers to, where we're supposed to keep our hands on the steering wheel when we're safely operating a motor vehicle. In this poem, 10 and 2, Hannah recounts the conversation she had with her young daughter when she started driving. And it made me really realize the difference in the life between being an urban Black single mother, being a white rural father. And this poem was stark, because at the root of it is that the advice she was giving her daughter was, whatever you do, if you get pulled over by a policeman, do not move. Keep your hands in sight, answer politely, do whatever they tell you to do, so you don't end up bleeding out in a gutter outside your car. And what it really made me reflect on, folks, was the conversation that Lynn and I had with our own son when he started driving. And our conversation ran along the lines of, hey, listen, unless you were doing something wrong, you don't have to answer. You have to give license and registration, and you don't have to say where you're going, where you're coming from, what you were doing, who you were seeing. We told him what his civil rights were. But you know what? Those are civil rights for a white male. And that, my friends, struck me so hard, is that is the definition of privilege that I was reaching for so long, as as the concept or the term of white privilege entered our parlance. I was really, really striving for understanding that concept, and talking to Hannah and watching her, and not just reading her poem, but watching her speak it, and the emotion and power behind it, because she was literally pleading for her daughter's life. And seeing the difference in conversation that she had with her daughter and I have my son made me completely realize what different worlds we live in, and how, I guess, lucky I am to live in mine, and how I've got to work to change the world so that a parent does not have to have the conversation she had with her child. And now I just made myself sad thinking about that, but we'll drive on. But anyways, Hannah Drake, Drake. Check her out. Google her. Go to YouTube. Her YouTube page. And I'm not wrong on this one, folks. It'll mean a lot to you. All right. So moving on. Hey, time to move. Have we gotten a winner yet, by the way, on the music quiz? Golly. I'm getting the look like that's a crazy question. All right. Is it time for more hints? Okay. So we're going to go back to our music trivia one more time, we're looking for, I'll tell you what, I'll just take the name of the song for the t-shirt. Okay. And so here's a couple more hints. I started out with Gangster White Walls. How about TV antennas in the back? That should help you out. So you want a free t-shirt? I'm not even gonna, you don't have to have the artist, though I'd appreciate it if you got it. But just the name of the song. So, hey, today we're going to send out a shout out to, and our first salute to the United States Postal Service. Today, our local rural postal carrier came bouncing down our long pothole driveway, quarter-mile from the road, and hand delivered some mail, and which he didn't have to do, but he just did because he's a good dude, and very, very representative of rural postal carriers. And I'll tell you, I had a great meeting with the post. Actually, there are 4 different postal worker unions in Kentucky. I had a meeting with one of them, with guys who represent the carriers, rural carriers, and I really hope to have one of their union representatives on in the upcoming days as our guest, and he can talk to you about the service that the Postal Service is doing right now during the times of pandemic, and also about the challenges that they face um, with attempts to commercialize their industry. And which really, so anyways, I talked to my postal carrier. We elbow bumped, and I told him, though, I said, when the story of the COVID-19 pandemic is written in the United States, that postal carriers will end up being the real heroes of the story. And which leads us to our very, very first question, which was actually a leftover from John. Voting by mail is a good strategy throughout this crisis. And B, if it shows up well under these circumstances, should it be adopted as the standard way to vote in all elections? Well, John Louisville, I will say yes and yes. In fact, today, Steny Hoyer, the House Majority Leader, said, this is a quote, "If it comes to it, we still have the virus, and best practices is being away from one another, disaggregated." That was a $10 word right there, disaggregated. Then I think we ought to go to an election by mail. Well, if it works now, if it works in the time of pandemic, why not do it all the time, Steny Hoyer? Why do we have to wait until we're standing on the verge of societal collapse to switch over to voting by mail? I have to tell you, okay, so let's look at the pros and cons of voting by mail. It's easier. Now think about it. You don't have to take a day off of work. You're not under any pressure. You get to literally, you could sit at home in your pajamas and drink a cup of coffee or a cold beer and look at your handy voting guide, look things up on the internet, and take your time going through line by line and filling out your ballot in the comfort of your own home. I think it'll lead to much more thoughtful voting when you get to, instead of just either pulling that hitting the button for all one party, or just running through and hitting basically the first name of the party of your choice. The fact that you have the luxury of time, you don't have to take time off of work, and you're under no pressure, and you can look things up. You can't do that in the voting place. Okay, so it is secure, and I'll talk about that in a minute. It's cheaper. It's really, really more relaxed. I mean, I think this is a really great way to do voting. Lynn and I, of course, both in the Marine Corps forever. When you're stationed overseas, and in fact, even when you're in the United States, most of the time I voted by mail and never once had a doubt about whether my vote was counted or not. Now, so here's the deal. Where voting by mail has actually been tried, which has been done in Oregon. They have mailed out over 100 million ballots since 2000, and there is only 12 cases of proven fraud. So this is really, really secure. I wrote the number down here, 0.00, well, about 6 zeros, 12% fraud rate. A dozen over 100 million ballots. That is incredibly secure and efficient. And so, yes, John in Louisville gets a big yes from me. I think it's a much more secure way to do it, and I don't see why we just don't go full time. Hey, and also side benefit, what they found in Oregon and other places, every single instance that they've at least attempted or tested voting by mail, voter participation went way up. Now, that is why Republicans do not want this. Okay, they're talking about delaying the election instead of doing something cheap, easy, secure, and popular. They'd much rather, change the law of the land and delay our national election than go to something that's going to drive up the number of people who are participating in the vote. So, yes and yes, John from Louisville. Okay, so here we go. Ricky Lee asks on Twitter, he asked my take on should the federal government save the public pensions with the downgrade in the stock market? Should the federal government save the public pensions with the downgrade in the stock market? Okay, so also, how do we lose our prescription manufacturing and development? Where was the State Department and military intelligence in preparation? Okay, wow. There's a lot to, as Steny Hoyer said on the previous page, disaggregate. So let's disaggregate Ricky Lee's post on Twitter. So back in the day, federal pensions, whether you worked for a union or a corporation or the federal government, were guaranteed. They were not based on the stock market and the ups and downs of the stock market. And I think they should be that way now. There are way too many vagaries, and right now we're seeing the fragility of it. But when you say save the public pensions, I think that instead of saving the public pensions, which I think Ricky Lee, and please hit us up again if I'm misunderstanding your question. This is why we need to, UBI, and this is why, at least in the short run, we probably need about 6 months of UBIs. Now, listen, I'm confident the stock market will come back. It always comes back. It's like real estate. It takes an occasional hit. This one's a catastrophic hit, but even after the Great Depression, the stock market clawed back. But I really, really wish that pensions were paid for in advance, and that whether it's the federal government, state government, or corporations, they were required to fund a certain percentage, and I don't know what the magic number is, 75% of future obligations, and pay into it every year before they pay dividends to stockholders. Because the most important asset the federal government has, state government, local government, or business has is its people. And they should be taken care of first, way before, I think, dividends are paid to stockholders. So, Ricky, I hope I answered your question. If not, send in a clarification. So, how do we lose our prescription manufacturing and development? Well, I'm not necessarily sure that we lost it. I think that, again, since that it's profit driven, that the money goes towards high dollar results. What is the next big whiz bang drug that is going to make a lot of money? And so I think the fact that this is a novel virus, I don't think it's fair to say that where are we on this. It takes a long time to develop these things. Just the clinical trials alone can take months and months and months and months. I was listening to a CDC representative talk today, and he was trying to walk the audience through double-blind testing, and and someone said, well, this particular drug is worked on animal testing. Well, great. It might work in animals, it might not, but until you try it in humans, and that involves giving some people the drug and some people not giving some people a placebo to find out whether or not it works. It takes a long time to do it and document it and accept drugs for human testing. And so I think it might be unfair, Ricky, to lay this off on the pharmaceutical industry as far as speed, But as long as the sole motivation is profit, they're going to go what the money is. And honestly, if they knew this COVID-19 virus was coming, they all would have been working on developing a drug and patenting it and selling it to us at a very, very tiny markup. So not going to hit the pharmaceutical industry on this one, though they are one of my favorite punching bags, but I'm going to give them a pass this time. And the last question is, where was State Department and military intelligence in preparation for this? I think that what we've seen, Ricky, is that we've seen the fact that going back now to early January, there are briefings coming in that this was a national security threat, and our intelligence agencies were reporting. And I think that you can date those briefings based on sales of stocks by senators and congressmen who sat in on briefings and immediately went home and called their broker and said, you need to start dumping stocks and moving us into something secure like T-bills, because we're going to take a whipping. So I think that if you want to know when those briefings were, they were probably classified, but you could probably bet they were 24 hours before congressmen and senators started dumping their stocks. State Department. Of course, our State Department is our eyes and ears and representatives overseas, our outward-facing representation of our nation overseas, and they've been beaten up over the last 3 years and denigrated and underfunded and stripped of their overt intelligence gathering capability, because people are leaving. People who know what they're doing are leaving the State Department. And so, and that one's purely on the Trump administration. If the State Department's eyes and ears weren't in the game, it's because they're underfunded and undermanned and overtasked and trying to handle a lot of really, really important things. And this one slipped by them. So, we need to rebuild our State Department, and we need to bring back as many other professional staff as possible. All right. I hope I answered your question. Could I have that flag on the second shelf, darling? Okay. Our friend David wants you to show Kentucky voters that you support stopping the war on drugs and starting safe treatment for all our addicted that are still alive. All right, David. Is it on the screen? Can you see it? Okay. All right, David. I hope you saw that, my friend. David gave this to me at our first meeting. And of course, I want to stop the war on drugs. And I want to make the treatment of destigmatize the treatment of drug addiction and make it available. And I really want to stop this ridiculous war on drugs, because we're putting way too many people in jail who really should be in treatment. One of the interesting things about going out and making campaign stops is that not only do you get to meet, people in the, typical voters, but you get to meet local elected officials. And in many counties, I've got to meet both the county sheriffs and county jailers. And one thing the jailers always remind me of, across the board, the first place that many people get their first drug treatment, their first mental health treatment, is in jail. Because somebody comes into jail, all their belongings are taken, they're put in a jumpsuit, they get their picture taken, they get processed, and then they begin a mandatory detox treatment program, no support. And we're not just talking about people on drugs, tobacco. All of a sudden someone goes from smoking a pack and a half a day to 0 in jail. You don't get as much caffeine as you want. And you imagine if you've ever tried to quit smoking or tried to quit drinking coffee or something like that, to try to quit, taking an opioid while you're in jail, all the stress, all the pressure, all the noise, all the violence. And, all of a sudden your one coping mechanism has been taken away. So David and I kind of disagree on this a little bit, but I take a holistic approach to this whole thing. We need to decriminalize drug use, keep people out of jails, and make treatment a viable alternative, a cost-effective alternative for everybody. And one of the things that our friend Dave likes to point out is the results of decriminalizing drugs in, say, Portugal, okay, or Spain, and the completely decriminalized drugs and drug use, addiction, and overdosing dropped through the floor after they decriminalized it, because they destigmatized it. And they've reached out to people and they've said, we're going to help you with your problems instead of sticking you in jail. So yeah. Okay, David, I hope you got the message, and thank you for the flag that you gave me in our first meeting. Also, hey, I'm going to remind you right now, time to give you the reminder to sign up to help the campaign here, mikeforky.com/sign up. Also, we're looking to drive up the number of individual voters, so of donors. So if you could only give $1, $2, $3, $5, whatever, go to the website, hit the donate button, and send in $1 or $2, because I would much rather have 1 million supporters than $1 million. Okay. All right. Hey. So we have got a winner in the music trivia contest, and the winner of the music trivia contest is Tabitha, and she gets she got it right. The name of the song is "Be Thankful for What You Got." So Tabitha, congratulations. By PM or by a messenger, send me your size, and I think we have your mail and address, and we will send you a free T-shirt. Thank you. And for those of you who are even slightly interested, the guy who wrote that song was a guy named William Devon. And I don't know why, but if you were to Google "Be Thankful for What You Got," a whole bunch of different names come up as the people who performed it. People say Marvin Gaye performed it, and folks like that, because he had that really, really deep, soulful voice. And it is this cat named William Devon who wrote and performed "Be Thankful for What You Got." So thank you, Tabitha. And congratulations. We will get a T-shirt in the mail to you ASAP. All right. So we got a comment from Nancy, who says the rain is messing with her rural internet. I'm happy that we are still connected, because it was thundering and lightning here not too long ago, and that usually means we have 4 days of internet outage. So if you can still see me, then obviously we're doing something right. Okay. Brenda asks, how can we stop big money from buying our elections? Should all media be required to give equal time? Let me talk about the second one first, because we kind of talked about this last night about overturning Citizens United, but I'll be happy to talk about it again. So, should all media be required to give equal time? If you are a broadcast media, in other words, if you own a license from the federal government and a part of the radio spectrum or television spectrum, which is a finite resource, then you should probably have to give equal time. And by that I mean, you don't have to give equal time to crazy people. But if someone is a declared candidate and they've filed their paperwork, and you give one candidate an opportunity to talk about an issue, then you have to offer the other candidates at least that same amount of time. Hey, and I've completely forgotten to mention this, but from time to time I write op-eds, and in the past the Courier Journal has been very kind and has printed my op-eds, and I had a little problem with Lexington's Herald Leader. They said that they didn't print op-eds from candidates, which is weird, because they print op-eds from Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul, who are technically perpetually candidates. But anyways, just yesterday, I got an email from one of the editors at the Herald Leader, and they said that they are going to allow candidates to run one op-ed per election cycle. So I guess that means one in the primary and one in the general. So I guess I better save my one op-ed for the Herald Leader to something I'm really, really pissed off about, because I want to make it a good one if I only get one. Okay, so now let's go into equal time. If you're a newspaper or if you are online, if you live stream or you podcast or any of those other things, no, you've got no reason or no expectation to give equal time. Going back into the history of newspapers, this whole idea that fair and balance is actually a kind of modern. It's kind of a modern construct when dealing with newspapers. There's a reason that there are so many newspapers called the Pawtucket County Democrat, okay, because it was a Democratic newspaper or a Republican newspaper or a Union Leader or something like that. And so, when I was editor of the Interior Journal, we celebrated the 150th anniversary of that great newspaper, third oldest newspaper in Kentucky, here in Lincoln County. And so I went to the archives and I went back to UK has got an extensive library of old newspapers. So I actually went up to UK and started digging through old newspapers. And if you go back 100 years, holy moly, you would not believe some of the things that got printed in newspapers. Literally accusing other politicians of engaging in unnatural acts or pacts with the devil and things like that. So this idea that newspapers are supposed to be balanced, yeah,